I've had this 1991 240SX for 8 years. Like most long-term project cars, it's evolved over the years as my tastes have changed. At one point, I liked it like this. Then I liked it like this. Nowadays, I like it like this. Except I don't really like it like this. Under the hood, this car has a KA24, which is the motor it came with, but in 2019, I bought a well-used turbo kit secondhand on Facebook Marketplace and installed it on this engine. At the time, it was a pretty good setup, but I don't know if you've looked at the calendar lately. 2019 was not that recent. I'm pretty sure there's kids born in 2019 driving in Formula 1. This turbo kit is worn out these days, and it's gotta go.
Really what it comes down to is I spent a lot of time and money turning this into a nice car so I could drive it around all the time, and driving it around currently sucks because the turbo setup currently sucks. A main reason I feel confident making this change is that it's not particularly permanent. Realistically, I can swap back and forth between the NA setup and the turbo setup in about a day, so if I swap to NA and I realize I've made a horrible mistake, it's really not that much work for me to swap back to turbocharged.
The first thing to come off is the air intake, which includes the mass airflow sensor, since neither of these parts will be reused on the naturally aspirated setup. The MAF sensor is from a 300ZX, and the factory tune that we'll be returning to doesn't support it. Next, I can pull off all the charge piping. Along with the piping comes the blow-off valve and the intercooler. You might be able to tell that some of this stuff is actually not that old. Specifically, the turbo is brand new. I thought that I could breathe some new life into this tired setup by buying an actual name brand turbo after a half dozen disposable China turbos, and when that didn't improve the situation at all is when I realized that it was probably time to clean the slate. We can save this for a rainy day. With the turbo off, I'm able to remove all the turbo-specific exhaust parts, the manifold, the downpipe, and the wastegate. Next, the fuel injectors need to be removed. These are 750cc injectors, which is almost triple the volume that the factory tune will be expecting. Last of all, I'm removing the ECU. This is a factory ECU with a ROM tune on it, which means I can't just plug in a laptop and switch it over to a factory tune. To change the tune on this, I'd need to mail it to someone who can reflash it, and it's much easier to just replace the whole thing. With all the turbo parts removed, I can start reinstalling all the replacement parts. Since I'm already in here, I might as well start with the ECU. The replacement ECU is from a California car, which has a slightly different tune from what this Canada car would have had originally, but it should work just fine on our setup. For the intake, I went with the old S-chassis favorite of cheap dog shit from eBay. I don't even know what brand this is, nor do I care. I did put a K&N filter on it, not because I suddenly started caring about brand names, but because the one that came with it didn't fit nicely with my aluminum radiator messing with the intake pipe angle. Next, the stock 270cc injectors can be installed in the fuel rail. I thought these would be hard to find, but it turns out you can get them very cheap on Amazon. I'm as surprised as you are that I actually remembered to do this, but the turbo drain fitting in the oil pan needs to be removed and the bung capped off. Usually this is the kind of thing I do after the giant oil slick appears on the floor. When I installed the intake, I also installed a stock mass airflow sensor, which now needs to be wired up since the 300ZX MAF from before used a different plug. I'm connecting the new plug via its own plug so that if I ever need to switch MAFs again, I could just unplug and replug instead of cutting the plug again. Plug.
It's been about 8 years since I last had a naturally aspirated KA, and apparently in that time, support for them has dried up a little bit. Back in the day, there used to be at least a few different legitimate options for an exhaust manifold and then some knockoffs, but it seems like nowadays the only option is the ISR Performance one, but I don't have a problem with that. It's probably what I would have bought anyways.
When I first installed the turbo setup years ago, I made a custom 3-inch exhaust system out of mild steel with a flux core welder. Since then, it's been cut up and welded back together 2 or 3 times. I don't technically need to replace this, I could bolt it up to the new header, but bolting this mess to the shiny new part would make me sad. I'm replacing the whole exhaust with a 3-inch catback HKS Sport exhaust that I'm hoping gives me a nice exhaust note without a ridiculous amount of drone. This is what I would have bought in 2019 if I hadn't been completely destitute at the time.
So the last thing I need to do for my exhaust system is to install this ISR high flow cat to bridge the gap between my new headers and my catback exhaust system. Where I live, there's not actually any legal requirement that I run a catalytic converter. You might be wondering why I don't just build myself a test pipe, and the answer is that I did build myself a test pipe, and it's horrible. This is probably one of the worst things anybody's ever made. I'm a terrible fabricator, and I decided that with all these shiny new exhaust parts, why would I want to connect them together with some piece of crap that I make? So instead, buy once, cry once, shiny new part, connect everything up, and then I will have a very nice, pristine exhaust system.
With everything installed, all that's left to do now is see if the car starts.
So I was pretty confident that that was going to start fine for 2 reasons. One, most of what I did was just installing parts that came on this car from the factory. And 2, because I gave it a test start a couple hours ago without the oil filter installed and puked all the oil all over the floor.
Let's start with the elephant in the room here. Yeah, the car is slower. It is obviously noticeably slower. We took a turbocharger out of it. We knew that was going to happen. What we lost in peaky top-end power, we gained in a very predictable linear power band that just revs out. This thing used to be kind of dicey revving it all the way out because there was the constant concern that it was going to completely fucking explode, but we don't have that problem anymore. I can just put my foot down, take it all the way to redline, listen to the exhaust, which I'll get to in a second. Exhaust on it, it's got this really appealing kind of dual overhead cam snarl to it. I think it sounds fantastic. I don't know if it's necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but I think it sounds like a really old school sports car from the 60s. Doesn't quite scratch my brain in the same way that hearing a blow-off valve fire off does, but it comes pretty close. What's really important to me, and what I think a lot of you may have picked up on already, is that I was able to give this car something it has not had in a really, really long time, which is reliability. I've driven this car more since I finished removing the turbo about a month ago than I have in the last 5 years combined. Because it's reliable. I can take it places and I don't have to worry about it overheating. And I don't have to worry about blowing boost couplers off and blowing my head gasket and sending a rod through the block, which are all things you do have to be constantly anxious about when you have an at-home turbo kit installation on your car. 3 or 4 years ago when I started restoring this car, that was my main goal, was to take it from a car that didn't really make any sense and turn it into like a good street car and a good cruiser. And we are 99% of the way there. The only thing that's stopping this from being the perfect cruiser is the fact that it doesn't have a stereo. The stereo that's in this car is the one that was in it when I bought it in 2018, and even then it was probably almost a decade old. Being pre-Bluetooth, it doesn't have any input method that's particularly appealing to me, so when I was piecing the interior back together, I didn't even bother to hook it up. The only thing it's doing right now is covering up the hole that would be left in its absence. The stereo I'm replacing this with is just another mediocre aftermarket head unit, but this one at least has Bluetooth. Surprisingly, this car has an actual aftermarket stereo wiring harness in it, so I can just wire the new stereo's harness into the adapter harness, and plug everything into the completely intact stereo plugs. I'd never even considered the possibility that this car might have intact stereo plugs, because S13s never do. It's really nothing special, but this is all the stereo this car needs. Oh yeah. Technically, this car is wired for a subwoofer, and I do still have the old sub from back in the day, but I'm pushing 30 these days, so I don't really think I need to. Oh god. Look at this fucking moron. He's gonna install the subwoofer. At the beginning of this video, I'd say the car is about 90% done, and after another year of working on it, I'd say we're now looking at probably around 90% done. Be sure to subscribe so that you can see what it looks like in another year when I finally get it to about 90% done. Until next time. What we lost in peaky high-end horsepower, we gained back in an incredibly predictable... What the fuck are you doing, you fucking dumbass? You fucking see cars coming through here?